6:30 p.m. To begin, I would like to ask Ms. Brown, if you wouldn't mind coming forward to the podium. We're going to address some of the questions that were raised since last week's meeting that you might be able to shed some light on regarding personnel positions. Thank you so much. Mrs. Goodell?
Hi, Ms. Brown, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just a quick question. There was an open positions list that was provided to us. And I know the dual language program at Soto and Johnson House starts in kindergarten, and I believe they're up to 4th grade at this point. Wouldn't there need to be 2 additional teachers added to advance those students in that?
So these are current open positions, and that's a vacant position at the moment.
Okay.
It's not for next year.
It's not for next year? Okay. And do you know how many students, maybe Dr. Gaeta might be better to answer this, but how many students are at each level in that program?
I don't know that, Linda.
In the enrichment program?
In the dual language program.
Oh, dual language program. I'll get that for you.
No problem, thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Mrs. Goodell?
No, I think that helps me out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick question. I noticed on the back page it says main office secretary. Is that oh, that's at Bunnell.
Right, that's a current vacancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. David?
Oh, so on the questions on the personnel, the one thing I was looking at, a lot of these positions that they say are open actually have interns in them. Is there any way, in the open positions you have in here, like I see the Bunnell High School principal, that's an intern. So that, what I'm trying to do is find the monies. And obviously, the funds for a principal, we're paying an interim principal, so it's comparable.
Right, so this list is just current vacancies, things that are posted right now. So those are filled, but are open for posting. So these are all postings that are up currently. Does that make?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Is there a list of current open positions that aren't filled? Yes.
Yes,
That's
I can
sort
give
of-
that to you.
All right,
Mhm.
because that'll show us what extra funds are not being spent.
Sure,
Okay.
we can do that.
That's what we're looking for.
Oh, okay.
Or
Yeah,
at
we
least
can-
I'm looking for, so thank you.
Sure, we can do that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you, Mr. David. Were there any other questions regarding any of the former presentations or questions since last week? Dr. Gaeta?
180 students in the dual language program.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions. I would now call Ms. Heather Borges for her presentation on professional services. Oh, sorry, Dr. Gaeta.
Sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
Ms. Manchini.
Not bothered.
Before we start, I would just like to address Mr. David's comment a little bit further with regard to that open position report. We brought to the board back in October or November a transfer request that, if you recall, went into the salary reserve account, and that was based on exactly what you're asking for. We look at the open positions and we kind of swipe up those savings and set them aside. And last month, I did report that we would be bringing you another one on February 28th. So we'll get you both information,
Yeah.
but you will have it. Good, thanks.
Excellent.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to address the following areas of the budget: purchase professional services, facilities, property services, utility budgets, the review of special education, transportation, tuition, and other purchase services. The facilities budget, of course, will be presented by our Director of Facilities, Rich Ruggiero, and Special Education by our Director of Pupil Services, Heather Borges. So I'm going to take you through just a few slides, and at the end of that, I'll pause, and you're welcome to ask me questions. Then we'll move on to Rich. Then I'm going to pop back in because I do the regular transportation and tuition, and then we'll turn it over to Heather, just so you have an idea of our process. And then I said to Mr. Malloy, no problem, I can advance this. You can't advance it, Ed. I'm sorry. Okay, good, thanks. This one, maybe. Okay, thank you. Okay. What? And it's really sensitive. I highlighted for you, this is on a page of your book that has the entire budget, and I highlighted those areas that we will be speaking about. Purchase professional services is off to code 300, so of course you'll find that under tab 300 in your budget book. Property services, 400. Utilities you'll find in both the 400 accounts and the 690. Transportation is 510, and that's both special education and regular education. Tuition is 560, and then we'll move on to the other purchase services in 590. So those last three will all be under the 500 tab. We're going to begin with a look at the purchase professional services, object code 300. Now these accounts in particular cross over a few different departments. For example, the contracted instructional services line there was really covered by Dr. Gata last week for in-service and professional development. Heather will address clinical costs since those are a special education account. And Rich will discuss most of the plant maintenance contracts. There is one key code on page 55 that is actually part of the technology budget. So Ed will cover that next week, and that's key code 0690. And I assure you when we're done, we're going to hit all the accounts, even though we're jumping around a bit. So I'm going to take you through these remaining ones that you see at the bottom there. Most of these were level funded. The school physician is a small amount every year for talks to our 6th grade students. The athletic trainer is the athletic trainer for the district, which is for both high schools. And the cost that you see reflected in the budget was actually obtained through a formal bid. And that cost is locked in for 3 years. So we had the same cost for this year, next year, and the following year. Legal services, as you look at that line in your budget book, you may note that there are two accounts, 0755 and 0756. This past year was the first year that we set up a legal service account separate for special education. We're required by the state when we report all our costs for special education to capture all of them. So by having just one account, when I arrived, I realized that that was a little bit trickier trying to extract those dollars. So we did come to the board and you did approve a new account last year, and it is both level funded for fiscal year 23. And lastly is 0757, which is purchase professional services. That too is a fairly new account. We had a few expenses, such as the cost of filming our board meetings in different areas of our budget that really weren't the most appropriate. So last year, again, I came to the board and asked if it would be, if you'd be in agreement to set up that new account, and we did. We've added to that for the food service program consultant. As you know, we added that last year based on the financial control audit that the town had commissioned. We also have a line there for funding for professional costs associated with the public safety liaison for our agreement with the town. And there is additional funds in there for the superintendent's designated professional services, which basically are just going to be any professional services that the superintendent designates as critical to our operation. Quite frankly, that's all I'm going to cover for the moment before I turn it over to Rich. So if you have any questions, I know it wasn't a whole lot there, but we want to make certain that we cover every area. And it is a little bit piecemeal when we get beyond salaries, benefits, and those basic accounts.
Are there any questions from Ms. Mangini?
Ms. Mangini, you mentioned that 0755 and 0756 are for special education services. They largely have not changed. Even with the increase in special education costs, we're not looking to change that number at all.
They're not both for special education. It used to be one line for our legal service expense in the budget. We split that into two lines. One is for special education, one's for just regular education and operations. And we level funded it. I would say that between Ms. Borges and I, looking at historical data and looking at our year-to-date, we feel the $120,000 budget request is adequate.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
It's more of a comment. I think, the fact that our special ed population continues to grow and we're able to keep this down speaks to the work that Heather and her team has been doing in terms of reducing the number of mediations and things like that, that contribute to that cost. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. All set. Thank you.
Good evening. We are going to do the facilities. Hopefully we get through this. Really. I'm good. So I don't have a lot of slides, so we'll get right to the point. Here we have our first slide. Do you guys want to look, because you had all this, do you want me to go through these and then we can do question and answers, or you want to do them page by page?
You can go through all of them.
Okay. These are some of the account. Go ahead, Mike.
What page you on?
132.
Yeah. These are all of the different stuff in the facilities department that I take care of. A lot of it is for furniture for schools, obviously utilities, and general maintenance in a lot of the schools.
Yeah, I'm finding them on 54. Mr. Evans?
Now, the utilities, we use DBS Energy, and they've been doing it for the Board of Ed for quite a few years before I was here. So they forecast all the utilities that we use for water, gas, electric. Obviously, we don't use oil anymore. So again, DBS does all this forecasting off of data that they've had from the past.
Go backwards. I think you skipped over the other one more.
Yeah?
Yeah. That's very sensitive.
No, that was it.
No, go ahead.
For one more?
You want to go forward?
Yeah, that's what I did, but she just said to go backwards.
That's not page 132.
Yeah, extermination, so, yeah. Say again?
So that's the electric, gas, yeah, there's something.
You're forecasting or budgeting for a reduction in electricity costs when rates, quite frankly, are skyrocketing,
So,
as our gas rates are skyrocketing.
I'm assuming you're referring to the reduction of the 73,000?
Well, you have a $38,000 reduction for your electrical bill,
Correct.
and you have an $84,000 increase for your gas bill, correct?
But we do. So gas bill, I'll touch base on that one. So talking with DBS regarding that, we've had some issues at some of the schools for gas. He was actually kind of padding it a little bit to cover some costs that may happen. We've had issues at a lot of the schools where stuff is getting old. It's not operating correctly 100%. So he wanted to kind of just pad it a little bit. That's the increase in the gas.
And I also, I'm sorry, can also just add that
Yeah.
You understand the concern with mine as well, but we've got to look at the cost of electricity now, but we do have experience. So that was part of the reason we didn't go with variable, we were able to budget based on that fixed cost. And the reductions you see are primarily the result of EDF looking at historical data and how we're trending.
Correct.
Of course, we're always taking into consideration the fact that we are guessing how mild a winter is going to
Yeah, I guess my other question is, I know some of our town buildings, you're saying we have some antiquated heating systems in certain
Correct.
schools. Is there any outlook where we say, okay, it's time to
So-
move on and, get rid of a 25-year-old or 30-year-old boiler?
So they are. So the
Okay.
town replaced the boilers at Eli Whitney, Second Hill Lane, and Flood. Those are all brand new ones, just this year. So they are going through right now, and they are upgrading all the old boilers.
And so is there a plan in place, like a 5-year plan or a 4-year plan to replace? the
Correct.
ones?
And they're gonna continue going on and on.
And
Also
again, none of
too,
that's on our budget, that's all in the town.
that's all on the town side.
Okay.
Yeah, any of the installations for all that kind of stuff all comes down to the town funding all that.
Yeah.
And also too, just, we're working with the town to see if we can they're gonna split the costs of electric for the pool at Flood with us, because that is just, running 24/7, it gets crazy in there.
Did you start that last year?
Well, we actually, yeah, so we actually did, so they're splitting the cost with us for that, so, which is a big help for us.
Yeah, don't say that. Thank you.
Rogerio, did you want to go through the entire presentation, or are you ready for questions?
Yeah, I can take questions wherever you want.
Yes, Ms. Jenner.
The old Honey Spot School,
Yeah,
who's paying the utilities over there?
so we ended up, we leased that, we have a company that teaches for our kids there, so we pay those.
So we pay the utilities.
Mhm.
Do you know approximately what those annual costs are?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah,
Check page 60 and 61.
I don't have that.
I'm not sure. I think, Ms. Burgess, you probably have more information on that, don't you? Or is that in your presentation or at a later time we can talk about the Honey Spot? I know, but I'm talking about the lease at Honey Spot, which covers the cost, doesn't it? Well, we know how much it costs we're getting back. We paid for it, but we also get the money back from.
Is Honey Spot would be HON?
Yeah.
926,
Yeah.
the 926 code and then the 944 code on water.
So we pay 28,000 for electricity, for water, pay about 2,600. What type of heat is there?
Gas,
Gas.
basically pretty much 1008. A little over 20.
It's not a big school.
Yeah. So it costs us about $50,000 a year in utilities that we're paying for, and somebody's leasing it.
I'm not sure 100% how that works, but
So
yes, I believe
there's-
that Aspire leases that from us.
There's a different out-of-district placement in that building. What they do is they give us a reduced cost on our students that attend.
And just to let the record show that both anticipated budget proposals for Honey Spot are at a reduction. So it's not an increase for next year.
So do you know, well, we can get into that conversation later, but I'm just curious what some of the costs are over there at Honey Spot. And apparently the lease that's there is,
I can get you all that stuff.
you have a copy of the lease?
I don't, not with me now, no.
Do you know who does?
I'm assuming we have it at the office.
No, there's no current contract. We are working on making a contract with them. There was nothing in the files from previous years.
So currently, we don't have a lease. We're getting no money from Spire, and we're paying a minimum of $50,000 for utilities.
But I think we get a
Mrs. Borges,
reduction.
maybe.
I understand, I don't need to ask Ms. Borges, because I've already had this
Yeah,
discussion.
no, but what I'm saying is, but they're also giving us a reduction.
We're getting a reduction of, a reduced rate for 24 kids, but we only have 14 kids in the system, so we're paying for 24 kids, 10 kids who aren't in the system, and we're getting a reduced rate on that 24, but 10 of those spots we're not using, and we don't charge any other money, and we're paying $50,000 for utilities. If that was my business model, I'd be, homeless. So it's just insane that we're paying utilities for a company that pays us no money. I know that's not you, but just.
Mr. Henrik, I would speak to that. I think you're bringing up some very valid
I
points.
can't hear you.
I'm going to speak to your point. I think you're bringing up some valid points, and that's exactly why, as we notice that challenge, we are getting into the process where we're looking to either work with Aspire to understand the existing agreement and change that or modify that so it serves as an interest of the Stratford Public Schools. So the point that you bring up has certainly hit our radar, and we're doing some internal work to make sure we're responsible for there's some type of favorable outcome for Stratford Public Schools and for Stratford.
And we can talk about that, I mean, this is I was more focused on the utility piece of it,
I understand.
and the cost that is being borne by our students.
Correct. I understand.
I know Mr. David said he was looking for the money. There's some money.
Thank you for your patience, Mrs. Cubey.
So I just wanted to add a comment to Mike's question. Last year, we asked about that property as well, and I requested a copy of the contract, but there wasn't a contract to be found. I was sent maybe a one sheet of paper, but it didn't have the information that I was looking for, which I think you're also looking for, and I understand Pam and her team is researching that. So it hasn't been forgotten, and we all want the same answers, but just know that they are looking into it.
The year has expired, nothing was done, so I think it's time we get to work on that.
Well, they are working on it.
A year has expired, and nothing has been done. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ruggiero? All right, thank you. Mrs. Mangini, do you come back up?
Okay, I'm going to touch base on just a couple of accounts before we turn it over to Ms. Burgess. Transportation, again, per state requirements, we have to break it down between our regular transportation special ed, our non-public schools, and our vocational. And as you can see, we are projecting a lower increase than usual, and quite frankly, we are in negotiations with our bus company. At some point in the very near future, we hope to bring an agreement to this board to review and hopefully approve. We have been working with the town as well with regard to any bidding requirements, and we are allowed to work to try to negotiate with the bus company. So we'll be giving you more information on that soon. Regular tuition, we do have a number of magnet schools that we participate in, as well as our aquacultural and our agricultural. And as you may recall, the long-term contract with the magnet school Fairchild Wheeler and some others at the city of Bridgeport had resulted in a lawsuit at one point, and we did finally settle that. Shortly after I arrived last year, taking no credit, I just arrived and worked with Dr. Robinson, and I do think it was favorable ultimately to the town of Stratford and the Stratford Board of Ed in that we are maxed at $150,000 for regardless of the number of students that attend over X amount, which I can't remember what the amount was, but I will share with you that our average bill prior to that each year was close to $500,000. So it definitely has had an impact, a very favorable one. So that's what those accounts are. You'll see slight increases there, and that's primarily due to additional students attending as we assessed our invoices this year and the number of students that are there. And I believe those are the only, other purchase services. How can I forget that one? That's a biggie. There are a number of accounts here that are handled by different areas. So I'm just going to share with you that the athletic and other transportation that you see towards the bottom is actually related to athletic events and field trips, such as the public library, job shadowing, and other events. The other student support services, second from the bottom, are part of school budget requests. And these are accounts that accommodate the expenses for items such as graduation, the high school drama club, sports officials, and related support, police and custodian. In addition, in that account, there's funds for student programs that enhance learning, such as Invention Convention. The telephone and computer services, both lines will be addressed by Mr. Malloy next week as they fall under his budget. So I will give you a brief overview about travel and mileage. The breakdown of that is on page 75 in your books. And you'll see that these counts are basically level funded. There was just a slight reduction in the district administrative account, and that was purely based on reviewing our historical data. Quite frankly, that's been a little bit of a challenge since I arrived, because obviously fiscal year 20 wasn't a full school year, and things weren't quite normal, nor was fiscal year 21. So when we do our historical data checks, we do go back 5 to 6 years to try to get the best viewpoint and to try to be as accurate as possible in our estimates. Conference workshops is on page 76, and it includes account 0758. That is an increase based on the superintendent's request. And there's also a secretary's conference for a small amount of money in there that you will see one year doesn't have any appropriation. And that is due to the fact that the secretary's contract requires us to pay for professional development once every 2 years. Our liability insurance number is based on input from our insurance broker. And workers' comp has been a challenge. We have had ups and downs over the last few years, and we are actually trending rather high right now, so we've been watching that very carefully, and that's the reason for the increase. And as I went back, as I said, to look at the last 5 or 6 years, I will tell you that fiscal year 18 actuals were over $720,000, and fiscal year 19 were actually over $680,000. And we do all our due diligence to try to keep our employees safe and try to keep a handle on workers' comp. We work closely with the town. We have monthly meetings, and Ms. Brown's office is very much on top of that and very attentive to the various issues surrounding it. But we did feel it was necessary to increase that line item. Yes?
What have we seen our experience rate going up or going down?
We are going up currently.
What type of injuries are we experiencing?
Types of injuries are primarily falls, I believe, Courtney. We have had a few of those, some injuries even within classrooms. And I really believe that they are a sampling of all of our staff, from custodians to teachers to CIAs. We've had probably every group.
COVID doesn't fall in comp.
No, it does not. That's all I have until we get into Ms. Borges's presentation.
Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Mangini? Mr. China?
On line item 758, workshops recognition, what's the breakdown for that?
That is, I can get you that in a moment. Grab my book. Okay, 0758 includes conferences for various groups, including the ALIO conference. That's annual for our business office. They don't go every year, but it is important. It's the CABE conference for board members is included in this cost as well. There's also meeting supplies, water that we provide during the board meetings is in that line item. There is also the American Association of School Administrators, as well as the Association of School Business Official Conferences. So there's
Is there a breakdown in the book here? or-
no, these are my notes.
Okay. So could we get a breakdown? I mean, it says
Sure.
recognition too. I mean,
It says, I'm sorry,
it says recognition. It says workshops, comma, recognition.
okay, I will give you the breakdown. I don't know where you're seeing recognition. Is that in the
It's on page
explanation?
Page
76,
76.
758.
Page 76?
I'm sure it's just a point of clarification. I'm going off history in my head, so I believe that isn't the convocation in that as well? Or put that somewhere else.
No, I think you're correct. It might
Yeah,
be
so
in
the
there as well.
convocation at the beginning of the year is in there. Also, teacher awards, I believe, you recognize a teacher for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years administrators, that's in there. When you say workshops, I think it encompasses a lot of professional development for our administrators. If you have SWC, I forget what conference one sometimes, I believe that's in there. We went through that one particular thing, and I believe, what's the total now, 31,000? There is an increase of 15,000 you're being asked, so it is worth mentioning, but it's on a total $129 budget, $129 million budget.
I will,
I appreciate Mr. David's clarification, but if you could please give me a breakdown of that, I would appreciate it.
certainly, no problem.
I mean, if we're throwing away $15,000 chunks, we might as well just start dropping down the hallway. I'll pick up a couple myself.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear what you're saying.
I said if we're throwing out $15,000 chunks, we might as well just drop down the hallway and gladly pick up a couple.
I assure you that's not what we're doing, but I'd be happy to give you that information.
Thank you for your history, Mr. David. Mr. Proto?
Between the 21-22 budget and the 22-23 budget, are we assuming in 22-23 that we will be doing more conference, professional development, and whatnot in person? Is there like a cost increase as opposed to what we were doing, whatever we might have been doing over the last couple of years where people were sitting in front of their computer, not having to travel or costs?
I think that's part of it, but quite frankly, don't forget our fiscal year 20 budget was set up with the belief that people would still be going to conferences, and even fiscal year 21. As we moved into fiscal year 22, we did take that into consideration somewhat. I mean, we're still cautiously optimistic that we would have been out of the pandemic. So to your question, I don't really think that we have adjusted significantly for that.
Any other questions for Mrs. Mangini?
Okay, thank you. It's gorgeous. Yeah, I
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me kind of present and go through all of this. Over the past year, you guys have received a lot of data, and especially in the last few weeks. So a lot of that is what's going to build up to what you see here and how we put things together in the pupil service department. So first of all, we have to start with the basic overview. The basic overview is that the services that we implement are mandated by law. Okay? The pupil service budget is unique because it's fluid. Why is it fluid? It's fluid because no matter how wonderful we look back on data, we cannot with exact and precise efforts say exactly how many students will move in or how many will exit. We also cannot accurately predict every single child's being identified and what services they need. So it leaves us in a state of flux. What do we do to deal with that? Because that's really important, and it's really important for you guys as you go to pass a budget. So I want to give you some background and understanding on what myself and our department does in order to give you the best prediction we can in the budget that we propose. Okay, we use data. These are the services, we've gone over them before, that the pupil service department needs to do. These are things that we need to do in order to meet all of our students with exceptionalities needs, in order to help everybody move forward and have success. We use the past data in order to predict what kind of staff, supplies, and tools we need in order to complete these services. So the data that my team puts together, we look at weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depending on the level of the data. We look at, for the past 5 years, how many students in Stratford have been identified as students with exceptionalities. And then not just the data on how many have been identified as students with exceptionalities, but what do their IEPs say? How many hours are required by law, and what kind of services are required in those IEPs? We analyze that data to decide how many speech and language pathologists we need, how many special education teachers we need, how we're going to service students that need contracted services, BTs, BCBAs, whether students can be successful in our current programs, whether or not they need to be outplaced at programs in which they can be successful. So that's a baseline of the data that we stop and we look at on a regular basis. We then have to stop and say, do we have the tools? So sometimes we need new assessments, because every 3 years students are allowed and should have a triennial comprehensive assessment, and we need to make sure we have updated protocols, test kits, that those are accessible for all of our staff, and that they're able to complete those with positive, good data that can help drive our instruction. Each one of those things impacts what we budget for on that budget page and why we budget for each of those areas. This is an additional list because I couldn't fit everything that the pupil service department does on one page. So here's your additional list. Just in case you remember, we still have to cover nursing services as well. When you stop and you think about the continuum we provide, it's so vast. So we really have to look at that on a regular basis. And that's why it's really important for my staff, who are all, a few of them are here tonight to support, to get together every week and to look at what's going on in the buildings. We also meet monthly with principals to make sure we are meeting their needs in those buildings. That drives what we put into this budget, what you guys see on that page. Why? Because these are our goals. Our goals are to provide a quality education that meets the needs of all our students. Yes, we always want to be inclusive. Remember in the presentation that I gave you guys on what we do in our department. We want to be as inclusive as possible. We want every student to be in their least restrictive environment. We want to hold everybody to high standards. And we want to make sure that we have student achievement at the forefront of what we are budgeting for. We also need to make sure that we abide by all federal laws. Okay? And we need to continue to develop high professional standards, best practices in the district. And things change. So we need to make sure our staff has adequate access to all the changes, adequate training to meet those changes. Budget assumptions. I hope that with everything I've given you guys, with the access to me, that you know and understand what was put in this budget is so that we can meet the needed service hours of our students. When I do the outplacements, if you want the true data tells you that approximately over the past 5 years, we have had between 8 and 12 students move into our district that require outplacement. To put that kind of an increase in the budget, we just can't do it. So this year we did put a couple placeholders, 3 to be exact, in the budget, assuming that we will have at least 3 move in. I can tell you that that's like 99.9% chance you're going to have at least 3, considering data tells us over the past 5 years we've had anywhere between 8 and 10. That is offset a little bit by the hard work that our out-of-district supervisor does, working hard to see if students are ready to return. Okay, so it is offset a little bit, but that's what you need to know. And we do a 3% increase because their tuitions go up. Okay? Service vendors are budgeted either at the same level or a 2 or 4% increase. I gave you guys a list, but I wanted to remind you, those are our programs. This is what we have for district programs that we need to make sure we are paying attention to, that we are expanding so we can meet more student needs, and that we are adequately staffing so that we don't end up with legal fees that we don't want. So everybody's getting what they need in order to be successful and show growth. Okay? What are we doing to try to save money? When you get to the page where you're looking at what we budgeted for, you'll see under clinical costs, we're down 3.26%. How did we get that savings? Negotiations, working hard with the vendors that we contract with to say, listen, you've got to do better or I have to go somewhere else. We want to, without compromising what the kids need for service. So through that, we were able to see a pretty decent savings. You don't notice it as much because we obviously increased in tuition costs and transportation. You guys are well aware of why we increased in tuition costs and transportation. Okay? I also took a really hard look at our professional development, and we have now done some research. We've worked with our RESC Alliance. We've gotten free professional development, so I reduced that so that we weren't spending money on those things. We looked at we've moved online for some of the testing, so that's helped with the psychological, different supplies we need for psychologists. We went online, so now we are virtual. We have some online supplies. We don't have to continue to purchase those. So it's a small amount. It was $500, but every little tiny amount matters. So we went through and we tried to reduce it everywhere we could because we knew there was an increase because there was an increase in student need. Taking all of that into account, we can continue to work with vendors. We can continue to look to expand our continuum of service. And as we do those things, we will realize savings in later years. And that's really important for us to stop and think about. And you guys are all aware, we have a good solid 5 to 10 year plan, but the first thing we have to do is get a budget that's not in deficit for special education so that we can start to climb out and realize these plans, better service our students and do it with our own people. So we want to expand current services to better meet students' least restrictive environment. And that's the language we use when we're talking about our students with exceptionalities. This is the budget page. And you can see where we went down as best we could. I want you to know we put effort, a lot of effort, into trying to find places where we could shave off money. Even if the money we were shaving off was $500, we tried hard to make sure we were reducing what we could, knowing what we needed to service.
What page is that?
Mine says 130, but I'm not going to guarantee that because it's in my book. It's out of my book.
It is, 130.
Thank you.
So now that you guys are all on the page 130, and I've kind of given you a background as to the hard work. And when Ms. Mangini told you it's an all-year process, very accurate. So we do this all year long. We look at it all year long, we reassess all year long, but our budget is fluid. But I think we did a really nice job using our data to make our best prediction for next year. Does anybody have any questions about this page?
Mr. Proto?
Our out-of-district placements,
Yeah.
approximately what percent of our total special ed population is placed out of district, and of that, what percentage are placed out of state? Do we have any out-of-state placements right now?
We have 2 out-of-state placements. I thought it was only 1, but we have 2 out-of-state placements. We have 100. What'd you say?
We've reduced our number of out-of-state.
We sure have. We've done a lot of great work. I told you the out-of-district supervisor returned 12 students, but we had other students move in and other students that had needs. So we've done a really wonderful job doing all of those things. I don't know the exact percentage, Ben, but we have 114 students outplaced.
And we have roughly 1,300 kids who have IEPs, so that's somewhere around 8%.
Just under 10%.
Yeah.
And what percent of historically, the question I always ask, our population on October 1st is X. By June 30th, we always see an increase in our population. What have we seen historically on a yearly basis of an increase in our special ed population once we establish our?
So I probably need to get you the graph, Ben. Everybody else got the graph, and I actually did that. We went back 10 years, and we showed the increase. And it does correlate with a pretty big change. So when you look back at those 10 years, you're going to see there's a bunch of years where it was flatlined, and that's when, for identification of students, we used to use the discrepancy model. When they moved away from that discrepancy model, you're going to start to see that rise. But I'll get you that graph as well. But just to let you know, over the past 2 years, it's been over 200 students, new students with exceptionalities.
And of those, which you know are educated guess, what percentage of those 200 are students who started with us who were not identified on day one, who we identified during the year, versus students who moved into the district with exceptionalities?
So for this year, we're tracking that, and we've had 125 students move into the district with exceptionalities. And right now, you're looking at about 93 students that were not identified, that went through the tiered process, that are now potentially going to be identified.
Mr. Cordova, you also have a question?
Oh, yeah, good, thank you.
Mr.
You're
Davis?
welcome.
Yes. By the way, thank you very much for the presentation. With the students with exceptionalities, the 114, I know 20 years ago we brought the autism program, a preschool program in Second Hill Lane, because we had, say, 4 or 5 students like that. It was cheaper for us to hire a teacher, hire aides than we were spending. As we looked out at the 114 students we're sending out, 3 or 4 could be brought back into district, must hire the right people and actually save money and do right by the students.
So we've done that. We've done that, and some of the students that have returned to that program, which now has 50-plus students in it. So that program that started with just a couple students now has over 50 students.
And let me kind of rephrase that too. Is there other programs that we could start in district that we don't currently have, or pair up with another district, such as a Milford or a Shelton, say, okay, you have 3 students, we're all sending to a school, school X, 20 miles away. We can send them 5 miles down the road. Can you guys chip in? Can we chip in? Do better by the students, for the record. Get the staff here. Oh, and by the way, save taxpayer money.
So step 1 is not necessarily a new program,
Okay.
but an expansion of the programs we have to meet more levels. We have some really great programs that we've started here. We have great programs K through 22. We just need to expand them. We need to give them a little TLC, and then we would be able to do that. On a bigger picture note, yes, futuristically, could we set up our own out-of-district placement in district? Yes, but you guys know it's space, right? And time and effort and investment. So that could also be part of it, but initially, what do we need to start with? Expanding the current programs we have.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
So, we've had a big influx of students, both with exceptionalities and the normal school system. I think a large part of that was due to COVID. A lot of people moved out of the city, moved to Stratford. The real estate market's crazy here now. Are you using the same numbers this year as last year, or are you anticipating somewhat of a reduction because of the
So we
timing of the COVID?
went back 10 years, and I used a correlation of the data from 10 years through now.
Okay.
Looking at that, I know we already had 125 students move in, which is historically more than what has. Okay, on average, prior to COVID, you were looking at between 60 and 70, not 125, not 203. So yes, but what I did for the average for this year was to look at what it's been historically, hoping that eventually we will start to level off again.
But you do anticipate some reductions in the student move-ins?
I would assume that at some point Stratford's not going to have any more real estate, so I would assume that possibly, yes, we will have some reductions.
I mean, there's not a lot of new construction. There is new construction in Stratford. There's not a lot of it, obviously, but, homes are swapping, and whether we're losing,
Yep. We definitely took a decline into consideration, with still being prepared for the fact that I thought it would have slowed down by now, and it hasn't.
Okay, so that has been anticipated.
Yep.
there any other questions for Mrs. Borges?
You guys are all very blurry when I breathe.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So much.
Dr. Sunday.
I just want to take a moment to obviously thank our presenters. As I listened to the questions, I felt they were very thoughtful. Okay? And this is my first year in Stratford, and I'm learning a lot about our district. I've learned so much about our assets and so much about our potential, and I've learned and identified opportunities for us to improve. And as we began this budgeting construction process, I have to speak with the highest levels of respect and be open and honest in saying that I've read some undertones of assumptions, and by and large, this entire team, as we went through this budget construction process, literally spent hundreds of hours working on this. Hundreds of hours. Based out of a commitment to our families who are sitting back there to make sure that we spend their dollars as responsibly as possible, and at the same time still give their children quality educational experience. I've never been anywhere professionally where we've been irresponsible with money, and I don't intend for that to happen here. There's a lot of work in my entry point, and I've spoken to each board member informally. I have spoken about the opportunities for us to grow, the vulnerabilities, things that I see that I think we need to improve on. But we're not just kicking $15,000 down the hallway. I sat in front of every principal and asked them to speak to me about every line and justify it, allowing to outcomes for children. It's not an easy year. And we're going to have some tough conversations. But I don't want those conversations to be based on an assumption that people have not done the work to make sure we deliver a quality school system for our families and we do it right for our kids. So we're going to continue to go through this process. I'm going to continue to applaud my team, applaud our teachers, applaud all of our colleagues who are here. And we're going to move forward with a responsible budget for the consideration of the board and ultimately to our colleagues and our leaders downtown. But there's been so much work, and I am personally proud of what we are bringing forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunday. Seeing no other questions, that concludes our agenda for this evening's workshop. Thank you very much to all of our presenters and all of the board members and committee members for your questions. This meeting will be adjourned at 7:23 and reconvene Tuesday, February 22nd at 6:30 p.m. for our fourth workshop. Thank you.